Speaking of loss of freedom, Joe Biden claims that the war in Ukraine is a battle for the free world and democracy. This is Team Biden works to ensure that the #1 state sponsor of terrorism gets nuclear weapons by reviving the Obama Ayatollah nuke deal, a deal that Obama admitted in an NPR interview would result in Iran having a breakout within 10 years of the deal's implementation. Joining me now to weigh in on this and so much more, former State Department and political financial analyst Morgan Ortagus. Hey, Morgan, great to see you. You know, this deal, it's so good. Team Biden is doing it under the cloak of darkness and allowing the Russians to represent America's interests. You know, what could go wrong?
Yeah, I mean, this is the same group that out of one breath, out of one side of their mouth, they condemn the Russians for what they're doing in Ukraine, sanction them, say all of these terrible things about them, most of it, obviously deserved. However, then out of the other side of their mouth, in the same breath, they allow them to negotiate, not with us, by the way, on our behalf in Vienna with the Iranians. So your audience should know there was, and I'm sure they're very sophisticated, they know this, President Obama, Vice President Biden got us into what President Trump called one of the worst foreign policy deals in history, the JCPOA, aka the Iran deal. We got out of that deal in the Trump administration. President Trump, Mike Pompeo, said, no, thank you. All this does is kick the can down the road. The Iranians can still get a weapon. Oh, and by the way, they're still committing acts of terrorism around the Middle East. So, go figure. President Trump's not going to give billions of dollars of sanctions relief to a regime that is actively committing acts of terrorism. So fast forward, this administration wants to undo everything President Trump did just because, right, for no reason. And what's really important for you to know is one of the stipulations of this new deal, which, by the way, this new deal is way worse than the old deal. And might I remind you that Chuck Schumer voted against the original deal. This new deal is even worse. One of the things that is being discussed in this new deal is to take what is called the IRGC Quds Force. That is basically the paramilitary wing of the Iranian military. We put them in the Trump administration, designated them as a foreign terrorist organization. The Iranians want them off that list. Now, why is it so important that the Biden administration does not take them off the FTO list, the terrorist list? Well, because the IRGC Quds Force is responsible for the deaths of hundreds of Americans. And right now, as you and I are talking, Chris, the IRGC Quds Force have active plots and plans to kill President Trump, to assassinate him, to assassinate Mike Pompeo, and to assassinate Brian Hook and Robert O'Brien, all senior administration officials for President Trump. So we are literally actively negotiating with terrorists who are trying to kill the last president.
Yeah, I had Rabbi Shmuley Botek tell me on my podcast the very same thing, that he was speaking with Pompeo and he had this entourage with him, and he had to ask, he said, well, what are all these people doing protecting you? He goes, yeah, Iran's got a hit on me. And of course, maybe that warms the cockles of Joe Biden's heart. Who knows? Communist Chinese, they're accusing the United States of instigating the war in Ukraine by leading NATO to engage into an expansion eastward in Europe. But China says they're not taking sides in this war. China is lying on multiple fronts here, right?
Right, of course. Yeah, listen, first of all, they've had Chinese journalists that have been embedded with the Russians. You're talking about Xi Jinping, the leader of China, the leader of the Chinese Communist Party, and Putin. They have developed a close relationship over the past 10 years, and they came out right before Russia invaded Ukraine to talk about how they had solidified their alliance and their relationship. I think that Xi Jinping might have buyer's remorse after seeing just the incredibly sloppy way that Putin and his team have actually executed their invasion of Ukraine. But make no mistake about it, they are carrying the water for Russia from a propaganda perspective. Also at the UN, they either abstain or vote in favor of the Russians. And so the Chinese are playing a delicate balance, a delicate dance, because they were actually, I believe they were the top trading partner with Ukraine before this war started. So it's certainly not in their interest. Listen, I think the Chinese were convinced by Putin that they were going to be able to go in, topple Kyiv in 3 days, and be able to talk about how, the West is over, the United States and NATO and everyone are down for the count, and you have this new emergent of, communist or socialist states, authoritarian states. Thankfully, the Ukrainians have their own heart and will, and they have pushed back. But we should not believe a thing about the thing that comes out of the mouth of the Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah, the Epoch Times reporting that there was an email that was revealed that a request was sent by the Communist Chinese to Dr. Fauci and Francis Collins to destroy the genetic code that was sent to them, and apparently they complied, hoping the Epoch Times continues their research. Last thing, Morgan, one of Biden's generals admitted that Biden's plan on sanctions failed to deter Putin. Meanwhile, Republicans are taking note that the current sanctions are pretty weak tea. Senator Rand Paul raised this question. I want to see if you can answer it. Rand Paul says, can you name one behavior Russia has changed because of Biden's sanctions? I would classify them as limp-wristed sanctions. Can you name one behavior, Morgan, that Russia has changed?
Well, that's a hard one. Listen, I have been with Rand Paul on this. I've been critical of the sanctions, not because I don't believe sanctions can work. I worked on sanctions at the U.S. Treasury for a very long time. But the thing that I always know, having been a sanctions expert, is they are not the only strategy. They are a piece of the pie, right? They're a tool in the toolbox, but they're not the only strategy or weapon that you're supposed to have, number one. Number two, if you're going to use them, as we did, as Trump did, against the regime in Iran with the maximum economic pressure campaign, you punch the whole way, right? Like if you're going to hit the king, you can't miss, that whole saying. So the problem with the Biden team is of course, as you said, they failed at deterrence. Like I'm glad the general admitted it, but all we have to do is look on our TV screen and see Russia invading Ukraine. So, hello, duh. Of course they failed. They failed at deterrence, in my opinion, because Biden is weak. And what he wants to do is look tough and sound tough without actually being tough. Listen, your energy prices, for example, today, what they are, whenever all of us go and fill up the gas tank in our car, this is not a manufactured, it's not an accident. This is a design, right, by the Biden administration to move us away from the oil and gas industry in the United States. And so when you look at their sanctions regime, it was designed not to fully take Putin and the Russians out. Now, why do I say that? What's my proof of that? Well, in my opinion, my proof is that they wanted to look and sound tough as it relates to Russia and their invasion of Ukraine, but they could deliver the knockout punch from a sanctions perspective and didn't, because they want them to continue to negotiate on our behalf in Vienna with the Iranian regime.
Full circle. Yep. Full circle to where we started the conversation. I think you're spot on that. And you know what? Let's not be too hard on Joe Biden. We know it's his know-nothing millennials making all these choices, and he's just out there reading the teleprompter. Morgan Ortagus, thank you very much. Appreciate the time as always, lady.